Back for another dose of CBT, where I'm critical and my guests are no doubtably pretty based. 5 years ago, you might have heard the word grifter and thought of someone like Anita Sarkeesian, who made a lot of money commenting on video games that she claimed she loved. But
Fandom. I'm not a fan of video games. I actually had to learn a lot about video games in the process of making this. And also, video games, like, I would love to play video games, but I don't want to go around shooting people and ripping off their heads, and it's just gross. So, hence, this is my response to that.
and when you heard the word chill, you probably thought of Access Media, who tell us something's great so they can continue to get early copies of a video game or see a movie weeks before anyone else. Even when the content they claimed was great is objectively bad. But if you're like me and watch way too many live streams, you may hear people like Nick Rekieta call himself the GRIFT King. You also might hear people like Ethan Van Sciver saying he's shilling comic books. Anyone new to the community might be a little confused at first. Are they admitting they're disingenuous? But it quickly becomes apparent that they're saying it ironically. And if you're curious as to where it started, it's simple really. They do it because it takes the power away from their detractors. And this isn't something they invented. In fact, it's been around for forever. Embracing words to take away their power has been done as long as language has been around. But at least as of recently, those on the political right of center seem to be the most adept at it. You might remember YouTube once had a thriving community of so-called skeptics. Their numberless enemy would call them shitlords, as it was a common insult in leftist circles back then. It quickly died when skeptics started calling themselves shitlords, making the word completely defamed. On the flip side, the left seems to be really bad at doing this. Let me show you one cringe example. This is Daniel Kibblesmith. He was writing a comic book called The New Warriors, and here's what he had to say about a couple characters he named.
Snowflake and Safe Space are the twins, and their names are very similar to screen time. It's this idea that these are terms that get thrown around on the internet that they don't see as derogatory, to take those words and kind of wear them as badges of honor. Safe Space is kind of a big, burly, sort of stereotypical jock. He can create force fields, but he can only trigger them if he's protecting somebody else. Snowflake is non-binary and goes by they, them. Snowflake has the power to generate individual crystallized snowflake-shaped shurikens. The connotations of the word snowflake in our culture right now are something fragile. And this is a character who is turning it into something sharp. Snowflake is the person who has the more offensive power, and Safe Space is the person who has the more defensive power. The idea was that they would mirror each other and complement each other. Be negative.
This book, which never came out by the way, was laughed at mercilessly. Another notorious example of this is the term social justice warrior. If you've been on any comment section on the internet, you no doubtably have seen someone call someone else an SJW. Believe it or not, there was an effort among people called SJWs to embrace it. They would say stuff along the lines of, social justice warrior? It sounds like someone who fights for justice. Wow, that sounds really badass. Needless to say, these attempts to lean into the insult didn't work for them. So why is that? I have a theory, but I'll get to that later. First, I want to talk about the ironic internet grifters and shills. For anyone following Nick for a long time, you'd know he's far from a grifter. He will ignore topics making big YouTube bucks unless he actually wants to talk about it. The best example of this is when everyone was talking about the lawsuits between Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. Also, he will just drop topics that are still hot if he gets bored or simply doesn't have anything else to say about it. He stopped talking about Vic Mignogna well before Yellow Flash and Tug did, while both of them still got a ton of views on any video that had him in the title. And Nick was personal friends with Vic at this point in time. And he did it again with the election cases. He read them, realized how dumb they were, and decided they weren't worth his time. Meanwhile, his friend Doug TenNapel was blowing up in subs. Sidebar, Doug's channel got nuked. So maybe Nick made the right decision on that one. Now, I'm not saying that Yellow Flash and Tug are grifters for beating a dead horse. I think there is a certain amount of value in reminding your audience that a problem still exists by talking about it. As we know, the internet's attention span is so very short. My point is, though, that's not very grifter-like behavior. Of course fans of Nick would know this. So why not call himself a grifter? His core audience knows it's not true, and it defangs the snakes trying to take him down. There was no downside, and honestly, probably wasn't even a conscious decision he made. And I think this same logic carries over for EVS. His detractors made a big deal when some comics he promoted came out and they weren't of the highest quality. So his enemies started calling him a shill. He did what any smart person would do and embrace it. Now, in a ton of live streams I see, shill is synonymous with promote, completely devaluing what could have been a legitimate criticism. I say could have been, as it was voiced by bad faith actors, I'd say like 90% of the time. In any case, it was a masterful way to manipulate language and make a ton of money doing it. And again, I would not be surprised if they didn't even consciously know they were doing this. So let's circle back to the left and their failed attempts at doing it. Mind you, not all of their attempts have failed. I would argue it was probably leftists in the LGBT community to rebrand the word queer from an insult to basically what amounts to another umbrella term for LGBT. Personally, that's why I'll never say LGBTQ, because it's nonsense to add an umbrella term to your umbrella term. I can rant all day about that community, and I think I will with another bisexual friend of mine you might have heard of before. Keep an eye out for that video about DC Comics pandering to us and how we, their target demo, feel about it. It should be an interesting discussion. Anyway, back to the main topic. So why have they had such limited success? My theory is the cringe factor. Not the cringe of being a snowflake or needing a safe space, but the cringe of people using them as insults in the first place. When I see someone say SJW or go back to your safe space online, it's almost as cringe as whatever they're reacting to. And you trying to embrace that makes it doubly so. It's like an onion of cringe. And the sad part is, you're basically revealing that it secretly bothers you. You're showing your hand, and we're realizing we aren't even playing the same game. Utter madness. That's all I got on the subject right now. Big thanks to y'all's feedback on my last video. Hopefully I found a way to make this one louder. Like and subscribe to join the cult. I hope to be making a bunch of new videos next year. But until then, cry havoc and let slip the gods of old.